Hi everyone, and welcome back to Miss Nick's Math Lab. We are here for another installment of our fraction fun review videos. So today we are going to keep practicing our fractions, our mixed numbers, and our improper fractions. But before we start, I want to introduce you to our special guests. Today I have my third hour class here helping us. Say hey, class. Hey! So they're going to be helping us practice adding and subtracting our fractions. Now, if you're watching this video and you're asking yourself, what is she talking about? I've never added or subtracted fractions before in my life. Then please go back to our page and watch the first video that's called Add and Subtract Fractions with Miss Nick, because that teaches you from start to finish how to do it. But today we're going to be reviewing, so we're going to just be practicing the things we've already learned. So let's jump right in. We're going to start by practicing adding our fractions. And not just adding any fractions. We're going to be adding fractions that are a combination of whole numbers and fractions mixed together. Class, what do we call those numbers that are whole numbers and fractions combined together?
Mixed numbers!
A mixed number. Very good. Thank you. So the first one we're going to start with are two mixed numbers that we're going to add together. And that's going to be 2 3/5 plus 5 3/5. So 2 and 5 are our whole numbers, 3/5 and 3/5 are our fractions. So yesterday we talked about adding and subtracting fractions, and specifically when we're working with mixed numbers like this, there are two steps that we can use to make this easier for ourselves. I'd like to ask one of my classmates and members to tell me, what's the first step? What is the first step that I am going to use? All the way in the back, sir.
Add 5 plus 2.
So, very good. I'm going to start by adding my mixed numbers. That's where I'm going to start every time. So I'm going to look and I'm going to see, okay, I'm adding 2 plus 5, and that gives me a total of 7 wholes. 2 wholes plus 5 wholes equals 7 wholes. Now, who can tell me what my second step is when I'm adding and subtracting mixed numbers? What do I do next?
Your second step is adding 3 out of 5 plus 3 out of 5.
Very good. I'm going to do my fractions next. 3 over 5 plus 3 over 5. Now, once I add those, they're normal fractions, so I'm going to add them like normal fractions. I add straight across on the top, and I keep the bottom the same. So I'm going to add 3 plus 3, which gives me 6, and my denominator, my 5, stays the same. So now I'm going to combine my 7 wholes and my 6/5 to equal one mixed number. So that's going to be 7 6/5. But class, can this be my final answer?
No.
Who can raise their hand and tell me why I don't want to keep 7 6/5 as my final answer? What's wrong with this answer?
Because it's an improper fraction.
Because 6 over 5 is an improper fraction. We know that because the numerator 6 is bigger than our denominator of 5. So before I can make this into a final answer, I have to take out whatever holes are hiding in this improper fraction. So I'm going to do that by decomposing it. We know decomposing is when we break a fraction apart and we stretch it out into a bunch of different smaller pieces. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. So first I'm going to break out my 7. That's just the 7 wholes. Then I'm going to decompose 6 over 5. And we know that when we decompose, we always remove the whole fractions first. What is my whole fraction for this one? What is the whole fraction that I want to use for these numbers?
5 out of 5.
5 over 5. So I'm going to start by decomposing 5 over 5. And then, how much is left over from 6 over 5 to 5 over 5? If I take away these 5 out of 5 and I take it out of 6/5, how many is left over? 1, just one whole? 1 out of 5, very good. And I know that because if I went back and I added these two together, 5 over 5 plus 1 over 5, that equals 6 over 5. So now I'm just going to use this to identify how many wholes I'm actually working with. So I started with 7, But then once I decompose my improper fraction, I realize I have another whole number to include. So my answer is going to be 7 plus the 1 whole here, that makes 8, plus the 1/5 that I have left over. So my final answer is 8 and 1/5. So that's how we would add our mixed numbers, and specifically how we would add mixed numbers that result in an improper fraction. Because if you ever end up with an answer that's an improper fraction, that means you can make more wholes out of it and should go back and double check that you've decomposed it correctly. But now that we've done that, let's try one with subtraction. So for subtraction, we're going to start with 3 and 2/6 minus 2 and 3/6. Well, when we are subtracting mixed numbers like this, especially with subtracting, we first want to look and check before we do any work to see if subtraction makes sense. What I mean is we want to check each of our pieces. So first my whole numbers. Would it make sense to do 3 minus 2? Is that subtraction that we can do, class?
Yes.
Yes, because my original number, 3, is bigger than the number I'm taking away, 2. So that would work. But let's use that same test to check 2/6 minus 3/6. Now for fractions, I don't have to worry about the denominator. That stays the same. But if I'm looking at my numerator, 2 minus 3, is that a subtraction problem that I can do easily?
No.
No, because 2 is smaller than 3. So instead of doing my normal steps like I did up above, I'm going to do something else first to make it easier for myself. Who can tell me what it is that I'm going to do first to make this easier for me? How can I make this easier? Not quite. What can I do to make this easier? Turn it into an improper fraction. That's my best bet when I'm subtracting fractions and the subtraction just doesn't work like this one. I need to change it into improper fractions first. So I'm going to take this one. I'm going to do around the world. So I'm going to do 3 times 6. That gives me 18. And then I add my numerator to it. So I get 18 plus 2. That gives me 20. And my denominator stays the same. 20 over 6. So that's just the improper form of this fraction here. Now I'm going to do the same thing for this one. 6 times 2 equals 12. And then I'm going to add in my numerator of 3. So 12 plus 3 equals 15. And my denominator stays the same. So now I'm doing 20 over 6 minus 15 over 6. Does that seem a little bit easier to do?
Yes.
Absolutely. So now I'm going to take this problem, I'm going to bring it up here so it's a little easier for us to see. And we're going to do 20 over 6 minus 15 over 6. So when we're subtracting our fractions, it's the same as when we're adding them. We are going to subtract across the top and keep our denominator the same. So my numerator is 20 minus 15. Who can tell me what I get when I subtract 20 minus 15?
5.
5. So my numerator is 5. And what should my denominator be? 6, because it stays the same. So my final answer is 5 over 6. Now, if you're still feeling fuzzy about your adding and subtracting of fractions, or working with your improper fractions and mixed numbers, please go back and rewatch this video and or rewatch the first one to give yourself that extra review. Then please make sure you do your homework and your practice problems to help it make extra sense. Thank you so much for joining me again for another review session. Keep up the awesome work. I'll see you in class. Say bye, class.
Bye.
Have a great day.